Most guests I interview on this podcast are people who started with little and accomplished much in life. Those stories inspire us all. This story is different. David came from a level of affluence. He attended an exclusive private high school in Atlanta and then received a degree from the University of Georgia. David was extremely smart and a brother at one of the greatest fraternities at UGA, always surrounded by a large group of exceptional young men. He was also driving a brand new convertible when I met him in the fall of 1972. Today, David is, in his words, penniless and lives off his meager government check and food stamps and has no transportation. Currently and thankfully, he does have a place to live, but he has lived in at least 8 different places since he was evicted from his parents' home 3 years after his mother's death, finding himself homeless. Homelessness has happened to him at least one other time, but because of the generosity of a few friends and ministries, to my knowledge, he has never had to sleep on the street. This, by the way, is not a story of drugs and alcohol, but mainly a story of mental illness and maybe a few bad decisions along the way. David has alienated his longtime friends, mainly because of things he has said or done after they reached out to help. David's window to the world these days is mainly on Facebook. Many of his posts are almost as if he's speaking to someone sitting in the room across from him and hoping they're listening, but not expecting a response. Some of his posts on Facebook seem arrogant in nature and cause people who are just trying to help to turn him off. But David insists he does not mean it the way it comes out, and it's part of the mental issues with which he struggles. The fact that David is alone, isolated, and frustrated certainly contributes to what he says is a progressive decline in his mental health. At the age of 71, David is articulate, well-read, and has an incredible memory. I think you'll be fascinated by his story and the journey that has taken him from affluence to food stamps. At the same time, through his story, I believe he will shine a light on the fact that a person does not have to have a physical infirmity to be ill.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. I have a fraternity brother with me. I met him, I just counted it up, Dave, 52 years ago in 1972 at the Lambda Chi House at the University of Georgia. That was a long time ago. We had what was called Zeta numbers, and that, for you people listening, it just your number you're given, kind of the chronological order that you were initiated. Mine was 1116, and Dave, I think yours was like 1078 or 9. What was yours? We had to memorize everybody's.
1078. That's a good memory, Bruce.
We had to memorize all that, but thank you for being on here today.
Well, it's my honor. This is something that I view as an honor that you're interested enough to interview me.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I think you got a great story. I think people are going to be interested. Before we get in the story, we had some interesting times at the Lambda Chi House. I was thinking the other day, I've got to do a podcast about this. One of the things that sticks out in my mind this spring actually, will be the 50th anniversary of the big streak at the University of Georgia. You remember that, right?
Yeah. Now, I did not unclothe.
Is that right? You were one of the few that did not. I can tell you that, but that's funny.
Well, I'm also the guy that, when you're skinny dipping, I'm the guy that stands in the waist deep water.
Well, there was a bunch of naked people there. And another thing I remember about you, I think I was a pledge. I don't think I'd have done it if I was a brother, so it had to be the fall of 72 because I was initiated that same quarter. But we went to the crystal, several
They
of
got that thing. They got that thing.
Yeah, you remember. And I think, so what happened, folks, is somebody came in, an older guy, and said, the crystal was having some kind of promotion going on, and they had the big crystal critter. They'd give you little critters if you bought so much.
It was purple, and it was the crystal critter.
Right. And so we decided as a prank we were going to steal the crystal critter. And it was the funniest thing you've ever seen. I won't go into the story, but I think I remember you actually wrote a paper about that. You had some assignment you had to write about, and you chose that as the subject. Did I remember that right, or did I dream that?
It's altogether possible. I have recounted the story. From what I understand, one of these things that was pretty well planned out. Everybody had a specific job to do,
Yep.
But when it came time for whoever was to take a knife or scissors or whatever implement he was using to cut the string, it was flexible enough where it didn't cut.
Right.
And they ended up just kind of jerking it down and running out of the crystal with it. And those poor crystal ladies running behind them yelling, "They got that thing! They got that thing!"
Yeah, and the problem is the getaway car took off because they saw our endeavor failed. So we were out there on our own, and we had to hide in ditches for a while.
Well, that was the late Lawrence Certain, as I recall, sitting out there in the
probably so
in that Trans Am that he had.
Yeah, right. He took off and left us. I remember that. So talk about when you came to Athens. You were a couple of years older than me. Did you go through Rush, or how did you get hooked up with Lambda Chi?
Frank Boggs and I grew up together. I don't know if you remember Frank or not. He's a couple of years older than me. I called him and said, y'all be interested in seeing me up at fraternity? He said, hell yeah. At any rate, I did go through Rush, but I quit after I was invited. After I went to the Lambda Chi house, apparently everybody I met thought I was okay, which kind of surprised me.
So when I got there, I remember you, obviously, and everybody knew everybody. You were around a lot of guys. It was really one big party atmosphere, but it was, people went to school, people developed friendships that lasted a lifetime. Great group of folks. I drove like a 64 push-button Plymouth when I came to Athens, and you were like driving like a late model Cutlass or something like that. Is that right?
Well, in 72, my father came to me and says, all right, this is the last car I'm ever going to buy for you. Tell me what you want.
Right.
So I got a Buick Grand Sport convertible.
Right. I knew it was a nice new car that not a few people had them, but not many. But you also graduated from a private school in Atlanta, Marist. Am I right about that, or did I dream that?
That is correct. Sure. And I managed to make it through 8th grade through graduation without getting a demerit.
Wow.
I was a pretty slick character in terms of being able to talk my way out of trouble.
So you came in driving a new car, private school. That's an exclusive school in Atlanta. Here you were, part of a great group of people, people everywhere around you. Today, it is much different for you. You are basically alone, and you're isolated. You have no vehicle. Just talk a little bit about the situation you're in right now, and then we're going to go back and talk about your journey to get here.
Well, the situation is I live in a brand new apartment complex in Winder, Georgia. And it is very nice. Was able to get a 2-bedroom, and I've got over 900 square feet, so it's a pretty big place. It's as nice as it could be, and can't say so much about my furniture, but that's a different issue. But the thing is, Bruce, I don't care if you live in the Taj Mahal and you have no independent transportation. It's a lot like being in prison, but with yard privileges.
Right.
For me to go anywhere, I've got to either pay an Uber or bum a ride. And I've got a lot of physical and mental things going on, but there are some people here that are in really poor physical condition. And the initial ad said for active seniors 62 years and over. Well, first thing that flashed through my mind was the villages in Florida. I said, well, that sounds like a good thing. And, not having any money, at the point I heard about it, I had essentially been homeless. Now, I was living in a Hotel 8 in Commerce, Georgia, for over a year and a half. And I had a car up until August of 22 when a minor accident, I mean, absolutely, I touched the back of the guy's bumper. Well, it had a bumper hitch and a ball and whatnot on it. Pierced all the plastic on the front end of my car. Destroyed my radiator, my trans cooler. But the car was running, and he just kind of waved out and said, yeah, everything's fine. And I drove the car until it stopped, which wasn't very far. And when I finally got it to the mechanic, he says, there's no compression in any cylinder. If we were to put a new engine in that car, it's worth more than the car's worth. Right. and so I ended up salvaging the thing. I think the salvage guy gave me $200, but I haven't had a car since August of 22.
But you talked about living in a hotel. You were living in another place in Athens before you got out, right?
Yeah, well, they decided I wasn't tidy enough.
How were you living in a hotel? Was somebody helping you along the way?
Well, I had some help. I had AAA, so I got the AAA discount. It was $63 per day, plus the taxes and whatever other fees they put in. And I had a gentleman whom I met over the internet, a number of years ago, back when they had these things called forums. And this was a forum about World War II combating. And he was the moderator, and I think he was the guy running the website. But at any rate, he has been generous to me beyond belief, and he still helps me out.
You were in the hotel, and then this place came open, and your communication basically, because you can't go anywhere and you're isolated, you're very frustrated. You can see that through Facebook, and I can understand that. Anybody can understand it, but your communication is mostly through Facebook. That's your window to the outside world, right?
Well, I spend a lot of time on the telephone with the insurance company, and various customer service people about issues that I might be having computer-wise or about other things. About half a day, typically, I spend on the telephone with some sort of customer service person.
What is it that frustrates you most today?
What frustrates me most is there was a wonderful program that was funded by the United States Treasury Department. It was part of the CARES Act, which was connected to the COVID pandemic. And they had what they called ERA 1 and ERA 2. And ERA stands for Emergency Rental Assistance. I met all of the qualifications for ERA 2. In ERA 1, you had to be directly affected by the COVID. The other was that it just had to create certain hardships, and that was ERA 2. Where things went awry was they kept telling me everything had to be submitted through the portal, and I kept asking my so-called processor, where is this portal? Why can't you take my emails? I filled out copious amounts of paperwork, sent in a lot of documentation, but I sent everything via email, only to have it turned down because of improper or inadequate documentation because it wasn't sent through the proper portal.
The frustration is getting the assistance that you think you're entitled to.
One of it was to pay for relocation expenses, and included in those expenses were hotel stays.
Okay, well, I can see that you would be frustrated, and what's interesting, and folks, you can tell that I'm talking to David Bishop, college educated, got a degree from the University of Georgia, I think in political science, and we're going to be right back with more of this story. David, the thing that strikes me as I listen to this, you're college educated. We're going to go back now and talk about how you got to where you are. You've been in a predicament here for a while, but you started with a wonderful life. So just talk about growing up, talk about your parents.
I grew up in Duluth, Georgia, and at the time, it was one of the most wonderful places you could possibly have grown up, in that almost everybody knew everyone else or were related, cousins and this and that. I mean, it was a true small town with a small town atmosphere and a small town attitude. You had to kind of watch your behavior no matter where you were, because if you did something that you weren't supposed to be doing, by the time you got home, your folks would know about it. We had neighbors, and we looked after each other. If somebody had a group of kids at their house, they were their kids. I mean, and treated just like family. We had some wonderful leaders when we got as far as scouting. I think every one of them was a veteran of some sort, and they taught us a lot. And scouting was a wonderful experience for me.
Your dad was also a war hero, right?
He was in the war. He did not get the Good Conduct Medal. I think he may be the only one who got an honorable discharge, but did not get the Good Conduct Medal. Now, he got a couple of things for valor and that sort of thing. 2 air medals, I think, credited with 52 missions in a little over 6 months, but he was over targets 34 times.
The point is that I'm making is you had great parents. You had a good upbringing like everybody else. I know nothing was perfect, but still you had a great upbringing. Then you went to Georgia. You were around all these people. You were in a great fraternity. I know that because I was part of it. After college, I lost contact with you. There was no social media back then, and just in the last several years have we regained contact through Facebook. After you got out of college, you got married and you went through a divorce. Talk quickly about that.
I was selling millwork at the time, and I had a pilonidal cyst that was really bad. And being the idiot that I can be at times, the doctor says, should I write a note to your boss explaining that you're going to be surgery? I said, oh, no, that's no problem.
Well, I'm sorry. What kind of surgery did you have?
Pilonidal cyst. It's a thing kind of at the top end of your butt that it's a cyst. And at any rate, what they do basically is take something that amounts to like an ice cream scoop thing and scoop out a big hollow place, and it has to heal from the inside out. I was doing well with the company, got along with all the folks, the people that owned it, the people that ran it, and thought there would be no problem. Well, When I finally returned to work, there was a problem. They had given my job to someone else. And so I lost that job.
Were you married at this time?
I was married at the time. And I went for, I don't know, several months. There was a guy, he was a fine Dells. He was a year or two older than us. Rip called me one day. He says, look, I've got an idea. He said, I've got a buddy that started a new mortgage company doing a new mortgage program that Fannie Mae has just put out that will do manufactured housing the same as if it were stick-built housing. We got into the business of doing mortgages for these manufactured homes. And at some point, we set up the Fidelity Bank mortgage department for them. The man who ran the place and probably owned most of the shares was not a particularly nice individual. The guy decided to cut my pay, and I didn't take kindly to that. And I said, well, I tell you what, you can take your pay and I'll take my loan and I'll just take them somewhere else. He said, you can't do that. I said, well, let's see. As it turned out, I was unable to take the loans with me. So, but that got me into the mortgage business where I stayed for many, many years. First as an originator and later on as a partner.
Let's go back to the original question. It was about your wife. How did that tie in with your marriage?
It's one of those things. I'm not the most observant person sometimes in terms of body language and nonverbal communication. I knew there was something that wasn't right. I couldn't quite figure it out. And one evening she said, I'd just gone with a new company and was doing well. She says, been thinking about this and I want a divorce. I said, well, a divorce? Why would you want a divorce? She says, well, first I was a daughter. Then I was a student. Then I became a wife. I need time to be me. I said, well, you don't think you can do that within the confines of marriage? She didn't. So that's how we ended up splitting up. It was as amicable as a divorce could be.
How long were you married?
Right at 3 years. I was perfectly content in terms of a marital situation. And I was oblivious to the point of not realizing that she was unhappy. And we had a nice house. I thought we were doing pretty well.
Do you ever hear from her now?
Well, no, not exactly. In 2006, I had a stroke, and both of my parents were needing care, and I filed for SSI, disability. Got turned down, of course, and it was one of those things where they did an investigation because the lady that did the initial interview, I never took, her name was Linda. I never took Linda's name off the checking account. I knew she wasn't going to write checks on my account or our account or whatever. So I just left it the way it was and did, a little bit of a hassle to start a new checking account. So I didn't do anything about it. Well, this lady thought I was lying to her. She thought that there's some kind of commingling of funds. And the next thing I know, I've got neighbors calling me and said, there's been some guy snooping around here asking questions about your ex-wife, showing her picture around. Well, that made me mad. And I called him. I said, look, you got a question about me. You asked me. He said, well, that's not the way we investigate. And I said, well, it better be the way you investigate this. Why don't you be at my house and we set a date. And he showed up, and within about 20 minutes, he realized that the state of Georgia had made a huge mistake in terms of questioning the issue of commingling funds and not really being divorced and that sort of thing. They still turned me down for the SSI.
I know you've mentioned this on Facebook. I know nothing about it, but you were also got in a business with some guys and purchasing golf course, managing golf course, and that they kind of did you wrong. Folks, I'm talking to David Bishop. We're going to be right back.
Bruce, I got kind of burned out in the mortgage business. I had done well and had some fairly significant accomplishments in the mortgage business. I rented some space from a guy I knew and started a little company called Bishop Financial Group, where I was going to do commercial loans. And I didn't do very well with it. About that time, there was a group from California, and this was in 1996, and the Olympics was coming. Well, we bid and got a partner, supposedly, the Sumitomo Corporation, not the Sumitomo Bank, mind you, the corporation, to be our interim and permanent lender. In other words, they would buy the loans and dispose of them after everything was said and done. And we even had a meeting in Conyers, because this golf course is at the horse park, and it exists today as Cherokee Run. It was going to be, under a Palmer name, but it was going to be designed by two people other than a Palmer. And in the meeting, we had the Sumitomo people there with us. And the question came up, you got the financing? And the gentleman from Sumitomo stood up. Yes, we're going to finance it. Well, we spent, about $1.5 million, doing the initial grading, knocking trees down, and doing some layout work and one thing and another. We went to Sumitomo for a draw, pay off, the graders and the equipment people and, our architects. They backed out of us. Apparently, the word yes only means I understand in Japanese. It does not mean I understand and I agree to your terms. And when they pulled out, we had to sell or give the property to the city of Conyers, who eventually finished it.
So just out of curiosity, as a matter of business, would you really, I can't imagine spending $1.5 million. You don't have a signed contract where you've been committed to the money. You just did it on a yes in a meeting. Is that what you're saying, or did I miss something?
No, there was a piece of paper, but it would have cost us money we really didn't have to sue them.
Let's change gears again. I want to get that in because I know you had that part of your life that was kind of a rough patch when all that went sour.
A lot of my job was to play golf with people, and I played a lot of golf. And I had a stroke on the golf course in 1996. Contemporaneously with that, two things occurred. Both of my parents were essentially invalids. And our managing partner decided that he was Bernie Madoff, and he made off with all the money, started one of these Ponzi type schemes. As I say, I'd had a stroke. I had both carotid arteries scraped out and cleaned and one thing and another. and got back feeling pretty normal.
Folks, again, this is David Bishop. We're going to talk about he went back with his family to look after his mom and dad. So we'll be right back.
All right, I'm living with my parents, taking care of them, making sure they're bathed, getting them to the doctor, the normal things you do. My dad had a disabling stroke in 1991 and was confined to a wheelchair. Was there and doing that sort of thing, but I wasn't bringing any income in. I had managed to buy a piece of lake property on Berkeley Lake for a very attractive price. Before my dad had his stroke, he did a lot of work on it, fixed it up pretty nice, and I sold it for a pretty good profit, which gave us some money for a while. And otherwise, the money we had coming in after he left his business and retired, he took installment payments on monies owed to him because of stock he owned, and eventually that ran out. By this time, the money that I had made off of the sale of the lake property was going pretty fast, and I had gotten involved in that very first tech boom. I had invested some money in tech pretty heavy, and in the year 2000, boom, I pretty much lost everything I had invested, which put us in a hardship situation. We were essentially living off of my parents' combined Social Security. After having the stroke, and in 1998, I had my first heart attack. And with a combination of that, I was really not capable of working. So I was caretaker for 11 years. That's when my mother passed away in 2007. It was a full-time job. It just didn't pay anything. She was so afraid of losing her house. Don't let them take my house away from me. Don't let them take my house away from me. We got one of those reverse mortgages, and I knew full well that when she passed away, whatever we had drawn out of that account was going to come due, and it'd be up to me to pay for it. Well, when she passed away, I didn't have the money to pay the amount we had drawn out of the reverse mortgage, and I kept the probate and foreclosure people at bay for 3 years, and finally in 2010 they got me. I was 6 days out of the hospital, and the sheriff shows up, says, you got to leave right now. I said, well, I'm wearing underwear, and I'm going to put some clothes on. He didn't much like that, but he didn't stop me. And I said, not only that, I was just in court 2 days before this happened. Said, no, you're not being full. Nothing will happen to you this month. You're good to go. And well, I think it was 2 days later when the sheriff showed up. The next thing I knew was, I'm packing up what I can throw in the car. Oh, by the way, you can't drive that car. Sheriff talking. And I don't know what the reason was. It wasn't because the tag was expired. I don't know what it was. But at any rate, I had to have come pick me up. And he put me up in a one of these extended stay hotels for about 2 weeks. And by then I had found a place to live. I was working as a barista at Starbucks at the time, and not making much money, but enough where I could make that rent and get by. Well, the landlord was an absolute jerk. There were three of us that were renting rooms from him. I knew the mother of one of the other guys. She and I had gone out once or twice and just kind of became friends. Well, she called and said, look, you are moving out today. You're going to move into the condo. The condo. Yeah, over here in Roswell. So we did. Well, I don't know, 6 months or so later, they had found a new tenant for that condo. See, we were only paying utilities. Had to move out and ended up with this drug addict family somewhere up in Forsyth County. I'm not really sure where. And was there 4 or 5 months. And I heard about this thing called Coming Home Ministries. Well, I contacted them, and they wanted to meet me. So I still had a car at the moment, and so I met them, went to church with them on Sunday. I ended up living at Coming Home Ministries for about, I guess, 2.5 years. And by that time, I had turned 62 and was collecting Social Security. And what I did for room and board was I worked at their thrift store. And I somehow I got the opportunity to move into a place in Athens run by a company called Advantage Behavioral Health. And lived there for about, 2014, 2022. But I'm not a real neat person. And they decided I wasn't tidy enough, and I had to leave. And so that is how I ended up homeless. And, I hunted around, and the cheapest hotel I could find was the Super 8 in Commerce. And so that's how I ended up essentially penniless.
One thing I saw you post on Facebook is through this whole process of going from really, the story is riches to rags, really. Most of the stories I do are from rags to riches. You started and you had everything going for you. You end up, what your words, penniless and isolated and alone. And also you've lost lifetime friends in this process. Talk about how that came about.
I said things apparently to people that offended them that I did not mean to be offensive. One time I did get a little bit too drunk at house, and that was kind of the end of it. And there were a group of them that had helped me out, and they just now will have nothing to do with me. I miss all you guys. And I wrote a conciliatory letter, I guess 3 or 4 months ago, trying to find a way to reconcile. Again, no answer. And I just hope you read it.
So talk about how your isolation from that situation, from friends, just from people in general, how has that impacted you? Or I'm sure that's been depression. It's got to be.
Yeah, I've had long-term major depressive disorder since about 2006. Or that was when it was first diagnosed. I don't know how long I've actually had it, but tried some of the antidepressants, and they worked for a little while, but they quit working. I finally got with a therapist in Athens, and we are on a program where basically what I'm taking every day for the depression, because it's hard to treat, are a bunch of off-label prescription. I am taking synthetic tetracycline that's mainly used for acne. But in elderly depressed people, it has shown to tend to brighten their moods. And it has helped some, but I take way more speed, dexedrine speed, than I ever took studying in college. That's what keeps me going. And also modafinil. I'm supposed to take 2 modafinils when I get up in the morning. But that stuff won't let me sleep. I mean, it'll keep me, if I take 2 of those things in the morning, I'll be up for 36 hours.
Right.
And so I
talk about this, that I know you've said this, I think, that you feel like you, even with the friends you've lost or whatever, that you feel like you've been misunderstood. Just briefly talk about what you mean.
This is going to bring up the diagnosis that I got fairly recently of being somewhere on the autism spectrum. Oftentimes, I will say things that people take as offensive that weren't intended to be that way. And Bruce, you've known me for 52 years. I'm blunt to begin with. I don't hold back. The gist of it is that mentally my condition has deteriorated, even with the medicines I'm taking. And my therapist happens to be on maternity leave now, so I won't get to see her until April. And I saw a substitute last week, and I came to her looking for coping skills for the frustrations that I have that I end up taking out on people who really don't deserve them. In other words, the customer service people, and an occasional store clerk, and I'm not that way. That's not the way I feel about people. I'm very frustrated about that. In addition to the big frustration that has impacted my life. The mental, I'm going to call it an illness because it is an illness. Depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. I get what I call sensory overload. I can't go, for instance, to the stadium at night because of all the flashing lights and music that's being played. I get in a physical state that I'm just incapable of enjoying the football game. And recently I did a battery of tests that the results put me somewhere on the autism spectrum. Now, we don't know where. She said it was probably closer to Asperger's than true autism. But regardless, typically people have poor communicative skills. When I communicate, it's what I think to be normal, and apparently to other people it isn't. But I had no idea that 60% or more of human communication was nonverbal. That had never crossed my mind. That, to me, communication was either verbal or written. When I was 18 months old, through no malice, neighbor kid hit me in the head with a hammer. I still have a dent, and I've yet to get a doctor willing to do a scan to see if that caused some sort of disconnection that could be causing some of the issues that I have.
So, Dave, let me ask you this, and I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to ask you 2 things. One, in a quick synopsis, when you look back, is there anything you would have done different than to be in the situation that you're in today, that you can look back and say, if I'd have done this, I wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't be in this situation, or What is your thoughts?
Well, not really, because the big one was the 11 years of taking care of my parents. You can always find some kind of little job to get by with. But once I was declared permanently disabled after a rather protracted fight over that, if I took a job, it would hurt me financially, or it could hurt me financially. I can't collect both disability and Social Security retirement, so I just get my retirement money, and that's about it.
What is your advice to others that you've learned being alone and isolated that are maybe listening to this, that's kind of in your same boat? You got advice for them?
Not if they're living in a motel, but if they're in an apartment complex, as I am, get to know as many of your neighbors as possible, because you never can tell who you might have something in common with. Right now, I guess my closest friends are a couple from New York, and they're active and vigorous, and I think that the lady may still go to. Well, I know he still goes to work, but there's one other lady that rides a bike. The three of them and me are the only active people here. Many people are in walkers, wheelchairs, or the little, I don't know what you call them, those little semi-wheelchair things.
Some of the people in wheelchairs or semi-wheelchairs or whatever can be your friends too. It doesn't have to be active.
Absolutely. There's a guy that has ALS, which is a terrible disease, but he's a wonderful guy. But see, they don't ever get out. And, I'm not going to go banging on people's doors, just looking for company. My door stays open. I never lock my door. And somebody wants to come in, they're more than welcome. And we had a little Valentine's Day celebration yesterday, and I tried to make that clear that if anybody ever wanted to come by and watch football game, or I've got one of these CD things, those 25 CDs, so I can put hours and hours of music on if somebody wants to come in and listen to music. Have offered, to help people in several ways, but it's just the environment isn't social, because so many of the tenants never leave their apartments unless it's to be carried to a doctor or whatever. Now, I hit golf balls. We got a field out back that full of rocks, but there's some grass where I hit a few limited flight golf balls, and I do that. Vicky, the girl who rides the bicycle, we are the two most active people. Going to and from where I hit the golf balls, there's a group that I just call the smoking ladies. They're smokers, and they have a designated smoking area where they gather, and a lot of times I'll sit and chat with them. As far as I know, I'm on good terms with everybody that I've met here.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.